So welcome back to Sports Injuries Overcome. I've been away for some time. Work got a bit on top of me. Obviously working for Aldershot Town, we got to Wembley and won. But funny enough, my guest here today was actually at an event of ours before we beat Woking. So I assume that he gave Tommy some words of wisdom. But I'm back now, and I think the wait is more than overdue. I think everyone's going to really enjoy this one. So today with me is Mick McCarthy. So first of all, Mick, thanks for joining me. How are you?
Very well, Michael. Thank you. Yes, it's a pleasure. Give you a bit of help if I can. And by the way, the words of wisdom I gave to Tommy was, good luck, Tommy. All the best in the final, mate. I don't think that goes too far as far as wisdom goes.
I think that's good enough. I think you can take 1% of the victory going through.
Do that, I'll take that.
So, we had you at Aldershot Town. You were by far, I think it's a general consensus that we were all delighted with how you spoke and just the entire event. We thought it was really good. We heard a lot of good stories about your playing career, obviously your managerial career. But my first question is not really related to the podcast, but it's just a question of, how do you feel sort of you transition from being a player to a manager? Because the amount of people that say it's incredibly hard is almost everybody.
Yeah, it is hard. I remember the first game, Port Vale at home, and I ran into the dressing room at half time to say my piece, and my mouth was as dry. I think my tongue was about 4 times the size it should be, and I started off and I couldn't speak, and I said to Taffy and Evans, my assistant, I said, he recognised it. He said, I'll do this. So he took over, and then after that I found it much easier. But the first one, when you're going from being a player to player manager and you've had to pick the team, and I'm leaving players out who were my mates, yeah, that's tough. But look, you got to do it. Either you do it, or if you don't, and you don't do it for the right reasons, then you won't have much longevity in it.
Obviously, your final days of being a player, they were hampered somewhat by injury, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And that sort of helped your transition. Well, not helped, but sort of pushed your transition from being that player to sort of player manager, and that's obviously how your managerial career started.
I tell you what it did. It stopped me from playing, and in terms of getting the job as a manager, player manager, that probably did me the biggest favour, because I do think that player manager is pretty much, it's not impossible because people have done it with a bit of success. Doing it at Millwall when they were in the second division and having to concentrate on both. I mean, I was still trying to get fit. I was going through the process of rehabbing. It never happened until the last game of the season. And then I went away on tour with Ireland, played some international matches, and I finished the start of the following season. So I guess that helped me concentrate, and everything was on view as me being a player coach and a player man. No, sorry, a coach and a manager, and no longer thinking of playing. And I say, in terms of my managerial career, it probably did me a favour. I didn't want to finish playing, but I'd had calf injuries and I just couldn't shake it off. And then I had a cartilage that hampered me. It was just one little thing after the other. Nothing major. You and I were talking about your injury. It was nothing like that. But nevertheless, it's still it's horrible. And it was horrible when I knew it was coming to an end when I couldn't play anymore.
So one question then springs to mind from that then is, what was your first thing you did, whether it's a mental thing or a physical thing, where your brain just said, you're done? Or was it someone else telling you that you're done?
No, it was my decision. I went away, as I said, I played the last game at home for Millwall, and I was the player coach, so I could pick myself anyway. So I got about 65, 70 minutes in that game. And then we had a tour with Ireland going to the US. We hadn't qualified for what probably would have been the Euros. Can't remember. And so we went on a pre-season, on a end of season tour, and I played in 3 of the games. I came back the following season full of it, thinking I was going to be fit. I just couldn't get there. So I decided that I should concentrate on the management coaching and finish my playing career. It's not what I wanted to do, but in fairness, I was 34 and I'd played 500 odd games, so I'd put a good shift in, to be fair.
Do you think if you could have done, how further sort of more playing years could you have done, or do you think you're quite happy with how it went, and you're looking back on it now, it's a bit better as opposed to at the time?
I'd have played forever, Michael. My playing's by far and away the best, and I loved it. And those 3 international matches I played in that summer, I thought I'm going to go back and play, and then training every day, expected to be fit Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday in the championship. I knew I wasn't going to do it. So it helped me knowing that. I mean, you had a bad injury, said to me, and you couldn't play. That never came to me. I'm saying this was after such a long time. I was 34. I'd been playing for 18 years. I said I'd had 500 odd games for club level. I've had 57 caps for Ireland. I wasn't injured and taken out of the game when I was 20, 21, 22. And it breaks my heart when I've seen young players have to finish because of injury. I was very, very lucky, and of course, I was going to another job as a manager.
So obviously the transition helped. I guess you're sort of going from your career sort of ending due to injury, but then you're going into a completely different perspective of you're the manager and the players are the ones that are unfortunately getting injured. How do you mentally transition from being, I wouldn't call it selfish as a player, but you are selfish in the sense you want to keep playing. You don't want to miss a game because the other bloke will come and take your place. But how do you find that mental sort of support for players who are now getting injured and you can't really do anything about it?
Let me tell you, it's very difficult. I don't think anything you say to players is, when they're injured and you're trying to console them, you can show empathy towards them, but I know from being injured, not having to finish injury, but just people trying to console you, it just doesn't work. It's a bit like, yeah, thanks, Gaffer, but you want to play, and nothing you can say to them, especially if they love the game, which I did, and most people who are playing do, and they want to continue playing, or they want to be in the team on Saturday. It breaks their heart. You see players when they get injured on a Saturday and they have to come off, fuming, punching the ground, and especially when they know, players are wise enough. They know they've got maybe not a career-ending injury, but it's still a nasty one. They've done a hamstring. There might be 6 weeks. They feel like they've done a knee. If they've done a cruciate ligament, it's going to be 6 months. And, they're bright enough. They're well aware to know what sort of injury it is by how it feels.
So as a manager, what's the first thing you do when a player comes off injured?
I'd have to go and console him. But like I said, listen, the players appreciate it. The players appreciate that I've been at that level where I've played and I've got injured myself. And they also, like I did, I'd appreciate the manager coming to say to me and trying to console me. But you might get a little bit of a consolation in it. But then the following morning, when you know you're not going to play for a while, you've just got to be there for them. And it's not at that moment, yes, but it's through their rehabilitation and through their getting back to fitness that you've got to be there for them, encouraging them, and have an understanding that they might break down, they might have to take another week, not putting too much pressure on them that they've got to come back and play, especially if they're one of your best players, one of them that you've got down as one of your most important signings.
So that was going to be my next question: is what sort of, who was the biggest or a number of players that got injured under your managerial career?
Matt Murray was one at Wolves, our goalkeeper. He was magnificent. I remember we went down to Norwich and we could have been beaten by 4 or 5 with the chances they had, and Big Matt pulled them all off. We walked away with a 1-0 win. And he was just a brilliant goalkeeper, but got injured, and he ended up finishing through injury very early, Matt. So he was one of them. Michael Kitely got injured for a long time. Wolves, I remember more than anything because we had a really good time. And Michael then had to go out and loan. He went down to Watford with Sean Dyche, and we loaned him out there just to get him games. And those kind of people, I mean, Michael was brilliant. Michael Kitely ended up playing for England. We signed him for Grace for about 25 grand, and he just, that was. And so I'm thinking for players, you think how about it is for the coach and the manager and the fans and the club when you lose those players who are your best players as well. It's tough for everybody, but of course, mainly for the player who can't do what he loves. And you know what? That's all well and good. You might think of Premier League players who are on 50, 60, 70, 80 grand a week, 100 grand a week. It's the ones in the second division, first division that might still be on 500 quid a week, and they're expecting their appearance money, win bonus, things that they've signed up to with their wives, the kids, depend on a lot of things. And not every player, because I know people who have no sympathy for footballers at all with what it is, and yet footballers are people. People say, "Oh, footballers are the same." They're not the same. Footballers are people. They've got mums, they've got dads, they've got brothers, sisters, kids. They've got lives. You said about mental illness, and going through the trauma of those injuries really does stress players out and test them mentally. And that's another thing, trying to come back from that. And it's tough for a lot of people, but for that player, and I know I've been there, you almost think you're letting people down when you're injured. And it's a strange feeling when reality is all you want to do is get back and play. So there's a hell of a lot of people get affected by certainly a professional footballer's injured. But even, anywhere down, your parents, I'm sure they were affected by your injury and how you were. And there's nothing that all you can do there is be there for them and try and support them.
And what would you say, sort of looking at that, and obviously you spoke about sort of the amount of judging that players get and so on, because I think I hold my hands up as well. I wasn't a vocal person about it, but I didn't fully understand when a player's injured. You just look on the edge of it and you think they're getting all this sort of money. They've got this great life. They're only injured for a bit, when actually it's their day-to-day life. They're, as you said, a lot of players are on appearance bonuses, so they're playing for their wage. They're not actually guaranteed anything. So what's your thoughts on sort of the public perception on it? Because I know I've seen players, I mean, the first one that springs to mind is Oxlade-Chamberlain for Liverpool. I'm a Liverpool fan, and the amount of stuff he got because he just kept getting injured. He sort of come back a bit and then get injured again, and all the penalties he got online. What's your view on that? And sort of, have you ever had to sort of deal with that yourself?
I probably did, but when I played, there were no keyboard warriors that could sit at home and never kicked a ball in their life, probably, and abuse footballers. And for me, they're numpties. They really are. And it just, like I said, I'm not on any social media platforms. I'm not going to be. I don't want to know what anybody thinks. I certainly don't go looking for it. But players are now. And I hear of players coming off because of abuse they're getting. And some of them will get abused if they keep getting injured when it doesn't sit. Whether or not somebody's been in a crunching tackle, like you said you were, and you get a nasty injury, then I think people will have sympathy for you. But if it's just a little niggle and you can't get fit, you get stick from the fans. Listen, I've been at a lot of clubs and I've had great rapport with the fans, and I'd like to think anywhere I've been, I've certainly tried to have that rapport with them. And it's a lot easier to have that when you're playing regularly, you're playing well, and you're being successful. And I can't, honestly, when you're being injured, I know, and I'm talking at professional level, you have to turn up for the games. It's purgatory. I don't want to go and watch the games. I want to play in them. I know you might think that people say that's selfish. Damn right it's selfish, yeah. Because that's what I want to do. That's my job. That's what I did for a living. That's what I love doing. And when you can't do it, it's blooming awful. It really is.
Yeah, that's the thing because it goes back to my point earlier of like if you're a centre back, for example, and you then can't play, someone else is going straight back in your place. If they have a good game and the team win, yes, you're happy they won, but you're almost looking at that player going, "Oh, I wish he maybe didn't have such a good game because I can't do anything about it."
Yeah, you're sort of happy that they've won. Honestly,
Tiny bit.
yeah, come on, let's be honest about it. You want them to win. You want them to win 4-3, but if I'm a centre half, I want the guy to be involved in them 3 goals we've conceded. I'm joking to that point, but there's a little bit of that. You don't want to lose your position. If anybody does, then they're completely off the head. If anybody's happy to be taking the money and not playing, well, they're not for me at all anyway, as a manager, as a coach. And I have to say, I've not come across too many of them. Players I've had have been desperate to get back and want to train, want to play, and want to be back in the team. Because come on, we sign up for that. That's what we are. We're footballers, and we want to do it. So that always, I've had great sympathy for lads who certainly have had bad injuries, and then the ones who get this niggling one that can't get shut of it, can't get to the bottom of it. That can cause real depression.
So then my question for that is, how do you deal with that? Obviously, you can have a bad injury and then that sort of, the diagnosis, the recovery. But for those players that get those little niggles here and there or this same reoccurring injury that they can't seem to shake, how would you deal with that? Is that a different way of dealing with that as opposed to someone with a big injury, or is it roughly the same?
You've got to show a great interest in it and try and find the root cause of that injury. There's nothing worse when you can't find it, or you think you've found it, and then you just keep breaking down. Every time you come back, you keep breaking down. And you've got to be there to support that player, along with the physiotherapist, the doctors, everybody at the club needs to give them support and actually, give them time. And that as a manager, as a coach, is tough. You've got a couple of best players that are injured, keep getting niggly little injuries. They can't get them fit. You've lost a few games. Everybody wants the best players back. It's ever decreasing circles that you start off and you're going down and down and down with it. And you've got to try and be strong for them as well and keep them going as well as everybody else. But I know when players are injured, they all want to be fit, man. They don't want to miss games.
And do you think you cope well with that in terms of like the pressure when players are injured or your star players are injured and you're sort of losing a couple of games, your form sort of picking up and down and the fans are getting on at you? Do you feel you cope well with that or does it not really phase you at all?
I think, listen, it's coping well with management in general and wins, losses, draws, good performances, bad performances, who you're picking, who you can pick, who you can't pick. There's a hell of a lot going on in the manager's world and how they deal with it in the coach's world. Yeah, I think. Look, I had longevity in the game, so I'm not bragging about that. But if you can't cope with it, if you don't cope with it well, you won't last a long time. That's my view on it. Oh yes, I could react to criticism, believe me. And like I said, some people will be criticising who actually don't know anything about it and criticising the player who's injured and they don't really know anything about it, And so, yes, I can get ratty with criticism, but can I live with it? Yeah, of course I can.
Do you ever miss that side of it where you're sort of, I know obviously you definitely miss being a player and a manager, but do you ever miss the sort of day-to-day stuff like that where you're supporting the injured players or you're sort of backing your players in the criticism or do you sort of quite happy that's aside?
No, I miss all of that, all that camaraderie with the players and the staff. I miss that on a daily basis because that was brilliant. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Everything about it, I enjoyed. Being a manager, some things more than others. Do I like criticism? Not particularly. Do I get on with it if I'm getting it? Yes, of course I do. It depends who's giving it to me. I'll have a look at it and see what it is and decide whether there's anything in it that I should even consider, or is it just somebody that's got an opinion and don't know a great deal about it? Yes, I do miss it. Yeah.
And obviously, you had, an impressive playing career, but also as a managerial career as well. And you obviously represented your country both as a player and a manager. Is that side of managing completely different when it comes to injuries? Because obviously you're not there day to day, so players might not be selected due to injury. So we'll use that as an example. What do you do in that situation when a player maybe isn't fully fit and you're not sure, but you want to include him? Do you give them a call, or do you just sort of leave it at that and give them space?
Yeah, if players are injured, I'll be giving them a call. Not just because I want to put them in the squad, but because I care about them and check up on them if they're injured. And you could say, "Oh, well, you're only doing it because you want them there." Well, actually, no. I'm doing it because I've got empathy for them and I care about their livelihood and actually how they feel about it and how their general welfare is. So I would keep in touch with them on that side. But of course, when you've probably got, depending if there's a competition one year, every 2 years of the comp, you might have 12, you might have 20 games in a season if you're lucky. And I'd name the squad, and then I'd wait and see who was fit. And of course, with some people, depending on whether it was a friendly or not, as whether the manager wanted them to turn up or they wanted to turn up. But in general, most players did, and were very good at that. And the problem was in playing them then. The longer I was there, it'd be somebody who would want his player to play 45 minutes. Only giving, if we're playing on Wednesday as we used to, then Tuesday we started. But even so, if they got a big game on the Saturday, none of the managers, now I wouldn't say none because others were glad for some of the lads I picked, but some of them didn't want players to play 90 minutes on Tuesday or Wednesday and then have to come back and recover for their teams on Saturday.
Oh, so there you go. So how do you deal with that? Because ultimately, like you're not, you do also think about that playing side of it, but you're an international manager whose games are the ones that are coming up, and that's all that matters to you. How do you deal with other managers saying, "Well, I don't really want this player to be playing as much, or I don't want this player to play in this game"?
Well, I'd have the discussion. Never ever did I think I left anybody out because a manager had asked me. No, I didn't. Some players might have stepped out. Whether I know that or not, I don't know. Listen, if it was an FA Cup final or a European Cup final, I could understand it. But they've all played, and I took the view when I was asked by a manager when I was a player, asked me not to go and play, and I looked at him like I thought he'd asked me to rob a bank with him. I thought, how crazy you are! Not a chance. I want to play international football. I want to play. I played in the Euros. I played in a World Cup final. Had I not turned up for games, I wouldn't have done. I wasn't good enough not to turn up for games. I don't think anybody is anyway. But I had to be there and be in the team and play. Some managers would do that. Some managers asked me. I didn't ever leave anybody out because of it. If they were injured, yes, okay. And then some would be a bit bitchy if you played them for too long. But I used to say to them, look, they're my players I know they're your players. We've got them. And I think if you ask the players, they want to play. They don't want to be left out and they don't want to be taken off as a sub either. So they're here with me and I'll use them as I see fit. And I'd be fair to them. If somebody had been carrying an injury or something, of course I'd consider that. And if they had to be nursed through or given 30 minutes, then I would do it.
And did you have that very often? Did you have that dilemma of knowing that they probably need to be nursed a little bit, but also it's an important game, whether that be internationally or at club level?
I didn't have it very often, Michael. No, to be fair. Odd occasions, but it didn't happen very often.
And sort of one sort of my final question is, what was the player who you had, whether that's international or club, that came back from injury or who sort of, like a redemption arc where they had a bad injury or maybe just have a few niggles and you think, oh, and maybe even your mind's going, they're probably done or they're probably this and that. And then they've suddenly come back and they're a different player.
Oh, you should have asked me that before. I've had a lot of players. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember anybody that I thought was going to be finished and suddenly came back and, ended up playing 2 seasons on the trot. I can't remember that. But I had players who were injured and rehabbed properly, did cruciate ligaments, ankle ligaments, cartilages, and looked after themselves, did everything the physios asked of them, and come back and played and continued to play for a long time. And that is an important part of it as well. If you get a bad injury, that first of all, you get the right treatment, which if it's the football club, you do generally. They've got good surgeons, good physios, but then listening to them, make sure you listen to the physios, the doctors, and do your rehab properly. And if you do, more often than not, they'll come back and they can carry on with their careers, unless it's a career-threatening injury, of course.
And obviously, we spoke about your long career as a player and manager. What's it like seeing the progression of the medical services and the treatments and the physios and everything like that throughout the years? Do you see like how different it is now, whereas it was back then?
Oh yes, when I was 18, I got in the team at 18 at Barnsley in the 4th division, and if you had any sort of an injury, it was hot and cold. You stuck your foot in an ankle injury, it was a bucket of hot, bucket of ice. You just in and out, and then we'd have a machine that put on like an ultrasound machine. Yeah, it is certainly much different. Players now are more educated as well into the bodies, into how they are and what they need to recover, what the food they eat, the training they eat, the gym work. They're far more knowledgeable than we were, and the medical teams now are far more. Hey, by the way, and so they should be. I'm talking 50 years here, because I was 48 years. I'm 66. So if it hadn't improved between now and then, so have pitchers. There's not as many injuries. So there's not as many tackles. There's not as many, collisions in the air. The game's not as violent as it was, and so there's not that many. There's so many impact injuries. What I do seem to look at is that a lot of hamstring injuries. The pace of the game is really quick. More muscle injuries, which I'm seeing now. And certainly when I look at fullbacks have got to be defending one post at 1 minute, and they've got to be scoring at the other end. I think I see, them getting injuries because of the workload that they have. So yeah, look, I think everything in terms of care, attention, doctors, surgeons, everything of that has improved. And when I see some of the best teams like the Champions League, so has the football. But when I see some of the teams who try to play like the Champions League and can't, I think it probably hasn't improved. But yeah, still a great game, and the people are in it. The people who are in it are great as well. That's what I would say I miss. I miss the people in football.
Do you keep in touch with a lot of people that are still involved with it?
Yes, I do. But I've been involved with a lot of people, so it's. I love it when I see them. I was at the LMA dinner, League Managers Association, and met a lot of people that I know, and it was lovely to see them.
Yeah, reminiscing on good times, I imagine.
Absolutely, yeah. We try not to. We try not to think of the bad times, because we've all had them. But thankfully, I had more good than bad.
I guess my final question is, obviously we spoke before about the reason I've done this podcast and sort of the mental side of things, where it sort of helps me and hopefully helps other people in my position who aren't by any stretch a professional footballer, but still suffer the same sort of injuries that professional footballers do. So my last question to you is sort of, what's your advice for people that struggle mentally and obviously and seem to be at that stumbling point where they're struggling to get over what, it doesn't have to be a bad injury, but an injury nonetheless that keeps them out from their day-to-day life?
I've had players who have struggled with it and struggled mentally with it. It's very, very difficult for them, because, we're professional footballers and we all want to appear to be strong and resolute, and we're all tough guys, but you know, and even the tough guys on the pitch might not be the tough guys off the pitch. So I think it's recognising it first and foremost, and I remember in the end I did have to say to somebody, and I had to phone the parents and say, and they, you know, hiding it from them, hiding it from everybody, but then actually said to me how they were feeling. And you've really, that's kind of extreme ones. All players who are injured, whether it's for a week or for 12 months, they're all agitated. They all want to play. I said to you earlier, they've got to make sure they do the right things to get back and play, and not just for one game. If they do the right things, they'll get back and play for the rest of the season. But as a manager, I tried to be there for them and tried to understand how they felt and make sure that they knew that we were doing our best to get them back fit. And when they did, they're going to be back in the first team squad, because they need that reassurance. When you're injured for a long time, you think you're never going to get fit again. I know my worst injury, and I'm finishing on this, when I was at Celtic, I strained a stomach muscle in pre-season and I could not get fit. And I'd just signed for Celtic, and the Celtic fans were asking if it was had I really signed, because nobody had ever seen me play. And I was out for probably 12 weeks, 3 months for the start of the season, and I was devastated with it. And and I'm at Celtic, watching Celtic games at Celtic Park with 50,000 there, and I couldn't wait to get on the pitch. And every time I tried, I was knocked back until eventually I got back. But that was about 3 months in. So I understand what it's like, and I needed the support of the manager and physios and everybody else, which thankfully I got.
Nice. Well, yeah, I think we'll end it on that, because I think that was, I've really enjoyed this podcast. So I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Mick, for giving up your time. These podcasts, they don't work without people like you giving up your time. So thank you.
It's amazing what you get. You give a lift to somebody to the station, isn't it?